Welcome to this Bible study series on the biblical creation. This is session number 2, the Modern Mythology. In the first session, we talked about exposing the false cosmology. The whole point was you can see further than you're supposed to. If you weren't convinced that there's a possibility that could be true, and I'm not sure this is going to do much to convince you either, although there is a lot of information in this one that can help you understand there's some lying going on. But hopefully you came away with the desire to learn more in the first session, and now you're going to further that in this one. So in Acts 7:42 says, "Then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets, O ye house of Israel, have ye offered to me slain beasts and sacrifices by the space of 40 years in the wilderness." The point of that verse is God gave them up to worship the host of heaven. They were idolaters, and they worshiped the stars, the angels, and we have the same thing going on today. In Isaiah 34:4, "And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down, as a leaf falleth off from the vine, and as a falling fig from the fig tree." So we'll talk more about that in another session, but the whole point is the hosts shall fall down, things being worshipped. So in this session, we'll look at naughty NASA, defying gravity, highlighting that science has no authority, and then the modern mythology. So as in the first session, you need to do some research yourself, in this case to overcome the indoctrination. You've been told a lot of things that you probably didn't research. You just believed whatever you were being told, as if that group, organization, person, whatever it might be, had authority. We're going to see that that's not the case. There aren't a lot of scriptures in this session. I'll say it's not much of a Bible study. But again, it's dealing with the lies that we're being told. And then when we get to the truths in the later sessions, we'll already know what we've been told now is false. So let's first talk about naughty NASA. The primary source of information concerning the established cosmology is NASA. In the early days, only Russia had a similar space program. And I will say that being a child at the time, I didn't understand anything, and I learned later that part of that competition that the United States had with Russia was an extension of the nuclear arms race. And of course, I won't go into that, but I think nuclear arms kind of a hoax as well. I'm not going to dive into that here. And in order to get an up on Russia, we wanted to claim that we went to the moon. So we're gonna look into that a little bit here. But now a number of countries participate in space exploration, as if there's such a thing. But these few sources of data are still specialized. All these groups that produce pictures and video and stories are a very, very, very small minority. No amateur can reproduce the information. So we have to ask, can we trust them? Then you can also throw in that other astronomical information comes from observatories, and you have to do a little research there to find out who runs those things. And that'll be mentioned in one of the videos embedded within the study. So first, let's look at a little documentary found on the internet about how Apollo 11 faked the pictures of the Earth. And you'll have to decide for yourself. Do you want to trust that documentary? That could be faked as well. So let's take a look.
An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. It cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private. Until now. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil. We just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we're so much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from any other windows. Here you can see the extruded window, probably 2 inches thick at the bottom. This is because the Earth's shine is coming in at a downward angle. It also causes the Earth to appear to be an irregularly shaped circle, for you are seeing the outside of the window at the bottom and the inside of the window at the top, which together form 2 different sized halves of a circle. Subsequently, this take was never used. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18th, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review, Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the Earth.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
You can also notice how the astronaut operating the camera reacted to the mistake by attempting to pan away from it.
Blue gas, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth. And
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work, and apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up to see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey?
Now let's take a look at another video which talks about outer space and whether or not it's real.
Is outer space even real?
Yes and no. What you see in the sky as far as stars and wandering stars, also known as planets, are there. How could we deny them? We don't know what they actually are, but they are there. Now, what we are told about outer space and what it is not true at all. Everything we believe about so-called outer space is due mostly to Hollywood movies and other media, including children's cartoons. Of course, NASA propaganda is the biggest culprit. As we have already gone over, there are no pictures of Earth, and even images of all the other so-called planets are computer-generated. NASA has gone on record numerous times stating that humans can't get past low Earth orbit.
NASA's next spacecraft, already being built and tested across America, will do those things and more.
This is the spacecraft that's going to take humans to explore the solar system. It's the next big step for NASA in exploration.
Called the Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle, or MPCV, this next-generation spacecraft will enable America to explore beyond low Earth orbit.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
And unlike the previous program, we are setting a course with specific and achievable milestones. Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit.
Low Earth orbit is supposedly between 99 and 1,200 miles away. The funny thing is that they say the moon is over 200,000 miles away. How did we make it so far in the 1960s and 70s if we can't do it today? Also, the International Space Station, just like everything else brought to us by NASA, is a fake Freemasonic hoax, completely fabricated and done with special effects, models, pools, zero-G planes, and various other camera tricks.
So it's interesting if we look at what NASA says recently. They can't go to the moon because of the Van Allen belt and the radiation. How did they go before? I mean, it's just a stupid excuse. I think as we look at some of the other pictures I have here, I won't read the pictures that I put up. You're going to have to pause the video and read them yourself and decide if what someone's putting out on the internet is a valid statement or claim. But nonetheless, NASA, in my opinion, had to do a stall to get their lie, in order, their evidence to line up, because there's too many things in the past that have been exposed. So if they went to the moon now, too many inconsistencies will be found. And as I'm recording this study, they are preparing to go to the moon. So I guess they've got their story together. And before then, the whole idea was, well, we'll go to Mars instead. We can't go to the moon, but we can go to Mars. And so they've solved their little problem, a problem that they created themselves, because they've been to the moon before, supposedly, many times, in what I would call Radio Shack technology. And just absolutely pathetic looking examples of technology that protects them in space and has all the electronics and so on and so forth. I won't try to expand on it. So in this picture here, again, you can pause it and read it, but basically someone highlighting that if you landed on the side of the moon facing the Earth, how do you get an Earthrise picture? You would have to look up to see the Earth. So there's a number of these out there. Don't know if they've come up with explanations. I'm not sure how you could explain that. And they supposedly have detailed where they landed. I've never checked into that. So some of these things I haven't researched. I'm already convinced. I don't need to go and research it further, but you may want to do that. And many times I've found explanations for things, and sometimes they're corny, and sometimes they make you wonder whether or not they actually did what they said. Over here on the right side of the slide, you have a common photo that would be put out, and of course with today's computers and even years ago, you could learn that they've pasted that picture of the Earth in there. So they take a picture in a set in a studio, and then later on they add the Earth. So I think they do better now. They clean these up. They've got the software to do that, and they know people are checking them out. So again, I think that's why they're planning on going to the moon. They've got their story in order, or at least they're planning to. Here's another picture of an astronaut, or an actornaut as we call them, on the moon. And according to the person that's put this together, there's all kinds of anomalies, and you have to do a lot of brain work on some of these things to really decide what is it that I'm looking at and does it make sense. And according to this argument here, this is baloney. Here's another picture, and evidently all the shadows are wrong. I always find it interesting that the pictures that they take, you can never see the stars, and they have an explanation for that, but I just think it's lame. You would think you would see the stars. Here's another picture shown on the web that basically says if you had footprints on the moon and there's no humidity there, there's no moisture, there's no atmosphere, wouldn't it look more like what you see in a desert rather than the beach? So again, I think when these pictures were first published, they weren't thinking about some of the problems that they were creating. Now, I don't know, maybe they have an answer for that. Oh, the dirt on the moon is different. How can we check? Here's another one where it's basically saying, the moon is so bright. How come I don't really see that with all the pictures and videos on the moon? Should be just drowned out. It's be so bright. Now, when the Challenger exploded, I live near the Cape, whatever they call it today, Cape Kennedy, Cape Canaveral, where all these rockets take off in the shuttles, and I remember this happening. And oh boy, I was believing the lie then. What devastation. Of course, it was on the news for I don't know how long. The whole country and the world was paying attention. And this, not only was this not meant to happen as if we really were going up into space, given that they were faking it, this wasn't meant to happen. And so they had to cover it up. So you'll need a plan B, because it turns out, I was stunned when I found this on the internet, that these shuttle, whatever they're called, astronauts, if that's the right word, they were alive. Still alive, most of them. I think they found all but one of them. And you got to go and look at the documentary that people have put together and the little stories. Some of them kept the same names. Some of them have changed their names. I'm the twin brother of whoever it was that died. It's pathetic that this is going on, and I'm not sure how this hasn't really made it in the news. Just shows you how the media's in on it. We're not going to share this, but people have found out. So when your pretend shuttle goes up, and the whole we'll see a little later how they're supposed to destroy that, but it blows up in front of everybody. Now we got to pretend that they're all dead, and now we need witness protection program to change their identities and move them around. So again, it's just unbelievable the amount of lying that's been going on. Now you can believe that they really died, and this other story is all made up if you'd like. This picture here kind of says it all. I always wondered as I watched many a rocket go up I'd stand on the beach and watch from not so many miles away, and just was amazed at how the rockets didn't go up. They went off to the side. And of course, this other picture here kind of speculates maybe what's really going on, and that is you ditch them in the ocean, and no one's the wiser. I think today they try to recover the rockets and the boosters, and then you don't have to really hide. You got to hide some of it. So, is that true? I don't know. No one's allowed to go out there when these launches go on. You got the Navy, Coast Guard patrolling. I don't know. I haven't really dived into a lot of this, but you can do that. As I said before, we call them actronauts, and if you watch any of their videos, it's just so lame how their hair, the women, it's just hairsprayed up. And if you watch a video of someone in one of those zero-G airplanes, their hair moves around kind of like underwater. It's flowing, and it makes sense. Whereas what you're seeing here, it doesn't. And of course, the hair stays up and the skirt stays down. So they have lots of videos with them supposedly in a zero-gravity environment, and it just looks so hokey. You just got to pay attention. You got to wake up. This picture here shows the numerous shots of the Earth that they've taken, and as you look at them, they don't make sense. Just look at the details, and these are obviously generated. And there's lots of videos of how they'll say that they doctor the pictures to make them look more presentable. I wouldn't want to see the raw footage, and they can't get the same picture. I mean, the consistent size of the continents and things like that. But the thing that gets me, if you go back to when they first went to the moon, how do you come back with one picture? It's like going to the Grand Canyon, telling people about your trip, and you have one shot. That's the only picture that came out. And I'm sure now they have multiple pictures and multiple videos. But back then, when the lie was first being told, it cost way too much money and time to make the one picture. Here's another one here. I'm not an astrophysicist either, and I haven't really looked into combustion and zero oxygen and so forth, but someone's claiming this shouldn't even work. Now this one here about the flight pattern, to me, I remember being very little and seeing the picture that looked a little bit like this sine wave as they put up a Mercator map. And I thought, why would it go like that? It makes no sense. And I think one of the things I read online was the explanation is they fly an orbit that's kind of near the poles. But if you look at the picture, it doesn't really follow, because it doesn't even get up all the way to the top of the world or the top of the map and to the bottom of the map. But when you go and you plot this path on a flat Earth disk, it makes a circle, which is pretty hilarious. So I don't even know if they're up there and what they're doing when they claimed. Evidently, they can stay up in low Earth orbit, but I don't know how it works. But the picture, if you follow the continents on the upper map and look at them on the lower map, it kind of matches. It's pretty funny, flying in a circle around the circle. Another aspect of the lying is satellites, and I mean, you're just going to have to look into this yourself. I used to believe the satellites, we make so many rockets that go up carrying satellites and this and that, and they never seem to come down, and they don't seem to have too many failures, if any. But then you have, as this picture on the right says, you got recon planes, because I don't know, the satellites aren't where you're fighting the war. I don't know. I had a guy tell me he's a believer. He says he has proof that the Earth is a globe. It's classified data that he can't share with me. And I go, so what's your source? And he goes, well, it's satellite data. So I immediately thought, well, we're done having that discussion, because you're getting data from a non-existent source. Of course it confirms the story, because it's made up. So again, something else to go look at. It's certainly satellites and the space program is a good source of money. Curious where it's really going. Hollywood, I guess. So let's watch a movie about satellites.
What about satellites and GPS?
As crazy as it may sound, satellites are a hoax. Have you ever wondered why there are never any damaged or fallen satellites? And why there are no satellite malfunctions due to constant heating and cooling? It's weird they don't melt in the thermosphere that's over 2,000 degrees. I find myself looking at the moon and wondering why we never see satellites pass by the moon. Did you know there are thousands of miles of fiber optic cables under the seabed that supplies 90% of the Earth's communication, internet, phones, etc.? And GPS works off of cell phone towers. It's called triangulation. Haven't you seen those really tall towers and wondered what they are? Satellite TV is just enhanced radio using ground-based towers. It's all ground-based, just like the old TV antenna. Science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke proposed the idea of geostationary satellites in 1945 in a magazine called Wireless World. And 20 years later, in 1965, they claimed to have successfully launched the first commercial geostationary communication satellite. Today, there are said to be thousands, but the odd thing is that trying to prove it only leaves you fruitless.
Now again, some more pictures. As someone's highlighting here, so who's taking the picture of the International Space Station? Given that it's CG, you can position the camera wherever you like. And I imagine they've come up with some type of explanation how someone did a spacewalk or something like that, or who knows. But as the shuttle was going, coming to it, it took the photo. They'll always have answers, but are they believable answers? Now let's talk about defying gravity, or you might like to say deifying gravity. Let's make it into a god. So gravity is responsible for the following things: making things fall, the tides, keeping oceans in a spherical shape rather than flat. They look flat. They're obviously curved. Causing planes to fly straight above the curving Earth, keeping us on the Earth as it is spinning, and we don't feel it. That gravity does that too. It keeps planets and moons in orbits, even though they should fly off. It's a variable force based on mass. It alters space and time, and it's the reason why stars and solar systems have been created. Of course, all that's junk. So these miraculous powers make it a god, and I'll say a false god, because it's not real. Now, I agree, things fall, but it's not because of gravity. It's not because the Earth is bigger than the thing and it pulls it down. Things fall because God designed it that way. What is the explanation? I don't really know. There's a lot of things I can't explain, and that doesn't make them false, and it doesn't give you license to go and create a myth. So, the myth of gravity, I won't read this picture, but you can see how they come up with gravity, and then they do some math. It's all math. And then their math creates a problem, so they got to come up with something to counter the problem, and then that creates another problem. They got to counter that problem. So they never throw the model away. They're always fixing it. It's just like evolution. It's the same problem. You can never make the lie complete enough. So it's, as it says, one big imaginary psyop. So here on the right, you got someone, I guess it's a car, I've never heard of it, a Mugen aerial atom. Guy's going 155 miles an hour and his face is about to come off. But we're sitting on a globe spinning at 1,000 miles an hour and we don't feel it. Because gravity compensates. How? I don't know. So if you do some more research on the whole idea of gravity and the globe, the amount that you're spinning on this globe varies, or the speed at which you're spinning varies as you go north or south. But you don't notice it. Your weight should change. And gravity is supposedly pulling you towards the center regardless of where you are. Yet the spin is not the same regardless of where you are, and you don't notice it. Really, as you go north, because the spin is different, you should get crushed by the gravity. I've read that somewhere. This other picture is just, telling the same story. So again, you got to do a little brain work here, and you got to think about what these things are saying, and then think about what they're telling you is what their reality is meant to be, and find the problems in it. We just trusted, at least I did when I was little, at least no one would be lying to me about these things. It's science. It's truth. Well, it's not. We'll see what the Bible says shortly. So here's some other examples. I don't want to argue these too much, but it's basically the same kind of thing. Smoke behind a moving train. You can see it's kind of left behind as the train moves. But on the earth, that doesn't happen. You have like a volcano eruption. That just continues to go up. Now, I'm not sure what this picture is on the right of this locomotive. It looks like a shark. I don't know what we're looking at here, but that looks like it's underwater, but I don't know. Over here on the right side of the slide, you have more pictures showing, I think, a volcanic eruption, and you don't see any kind of shear as the top of the cloud is moving at a different speed than the rest. The gravity holds it in place. It's quite amazing. It's amazing because it's not true. Here's another one that I found, and then I went and did a little bit more research. This plane's going extremely fast, but there are some things that go even faster. I put that on the right side of the slide. These things are moving so fast. The compensation to keep going with the curve, basically the pilot, and some of these are unmanned, you'd have to be pointing downward slightly so that when you're flying in the, kind of downward, you're really flying straight. Of course, I don't really know how that works because it's not true. But of course, gravity is supposed to compensate for you. You just fly straight and gravity will take care of it. Talk to pilots if you know one. Do they compensate as they fly? And I'm sure someone would say, well, it's so subtle you don't notice it. Okay.
What about gravity?
Gravity is necessary in order for a spinning ball Earth to work. People readily believe that you can't fall off of a spinning ball that's darting through outer space at speeds that you can't even comprehend, yet they will deny how much easier it is to stay on a flat surface that doesn't move. Gravity is a scapegoat for all that cannot be explained, and it has never been proven. The reason why things fall or float is because of density and buoyancy. If something is heavier than air, it falls. If it's lighter than air, it floats. Very straightforward. Your phone is denser than the air, therefore it falls when you drop it. Everything works because of density. No need to factor in imaginary components. Quote, "The law of gravitation is said by the advocates of the Newtonian system of astronomy to be the greatest discovery of science and the foundation of the whole of modern astronomy. If therefore it can be shown that gravitation is a pure assumption and an imagination of the mind only, that it has no existence outside of the brains of its expounders and advocates, the whole of the hypotheses of this modern so-called science fall to the ground as flat as the surface of the ocean. And this most exact of all sciences, this wonderful feat of the intellect, becomes at once the most ridiculous superstition and the most gigantic imposture to which ignorance and credulity could ever be exposed." Thomas Winship, Zetetic Cosmogony.
Now let's talk about science having no authority, because scientists say the opposite. So science has information, theories, and models. Scientists often have data that fit theories or models, and these models are always being changed rather than discarded. They find a little problem here, and they tweak the model, and then they tweak the model some more, and before you know it, the model's out of control. But we have to remember that science has no authority concerning truth. They can make observations, and they can suppose things and make claims. But don't listen to people say, but scientists have proven. They haven't proven anything. They've made bold claims, and they claim authority that they don't have. Only the Bible has such authority because it comes from God. Now, someone can say something that's true, but the truth comes from the Word, not from that person. But many things that are said aren't true, and they claim that they are. So science is used to bully people into believing lies. And they'll basically criticize you. You don't know anything about this. You're not smart enough. You're not educated in this area. You don't understand the math. Because that's what a lot of it is. It's just math. It's not real. It's math. And this is probably the only study where I'll say this. I have an advanced degree. I'm not stupid. A lot of other people aren't stupid either that disagree with a lot of the science. And while my degree isn't in some of these fields, I am able to read some of the writings and follow some of the claims, and they don't make sense. Okay? So don't be bullied. You don't have to go and learn the field in order to shoot it down. You're not going to learn the field if you disagree with it. You're going to be kicked out. Now here's what the authority, the Bible, says about science. 1 Timothy 6, verse 20. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust. Avoid profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science falsely so called. So the main point there is there's things called science, and there really aren't. That's what the Bible's talking about here. You have to go read the verse for the full context, but we have to be careful of what people call science. In many cases, it's not. Just because you do some math and you make an equation and you say this equation works out, doesn't mean it describes reality. So here's a case where people try to steal the Bible's authority. And this comes from Christians, not the first statement. Particle physicists claim that there are 10 dimensions. I don't know. In their math world, it's true. Now this is where the Christians jump on board. 4 of these can be sensed, 3 spatial and 1 time. So they'll say the Bible confirms these 4, and then they say, so Einstein was right, and Einstein's a liar. But here's what Ephesians 3 verse 18 says. May be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth, length, depth, and height. And there's more to it, but basically there's 4 things there. So they say, see, there's 4 dimensions. Paul's talking about 4 dimensions. Paul's talked to God. He's been to heaven. He knows. Okay? So, but let's go see what these words mean. None of them are time, unless you want to make an end of time, but let's see what the Bible says. Genesis 13, verse 17. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. So length and breadth are basically on the surface of the earth. It's spatial. Proverbs 25, verse 3. The heaven for height, the earth for depth, and the heart of kings is unsearchable. And if you go and find some other verses, you'll find depth is also used for like the depths of hell or the depths of the sea. So height is up, depth is down. These 4 dimensions are really only 3, because up and down are just the opposites. But see, God talks about his creation in that perspective. The heaven is above the earth, and the earth is above hell, and above this vastness of water in which the earth was created. So you have to go off and research that, and of course you got to put the false cosmology out of your mind. We'll talk about that in later sessions, but there aren't 4 dimensions being talked about in Ephesians, and Einstein isn't right. And I don't know if there are 10 dimensions, but the Bible doesn't claim that there are. And scientists don't know if there are. It's all math. So now let's go to some other things that you'll find on the internet. In this picture, someone's claiming, how did this space capsule turn into the lunar lander and then come back down as a capsule? Now, I don't know what the explanation is, but what we have to understand is these smart people, they do have some answers for some of these things. Doesn't make them true, but they can answer some of these things. Now, I don't know how that works. Doesn't look to me like it fits. But, you can go research some of those things, and you might be swayed into thinking, look, they answered one of the questions. They must not be lying. Well, you're going to have to decide if that's really the case. Here's another one on the right showing how does this dune buggy fit inside that lunar module. And I'm sure somebody will have a way of saying, well, we let all the air out of the tires and, the thing's all collapsed. And I'm not sure how they can put it together in those big suits, but I'm sure they'll have an answer. That doesn't mean the answer is truth. Here's another one here. This super hot capsule comes down and lands in the ocean, yet no steam comes shooting up. So I don't know if they have an answer for that one. Again, they may have answers. Are they right? Now, another part of the cosmology that really burns me concerning Christians is believing what some scientists claim, and now you're trapped in their world. So the ages and distances of stars is one of those. So to me, the Bible teaches an age of about 6,000 years for creation, and I have a study that shows the 7,000 years of history, which 6,000 have already happened. You can go look at that and follow and see what the Bible teaches. But astronomy tells a different story. The astronomers claim that science proves that stars are older and farther away. Now that's their claim, doesn't mean it's correct. As far as I'm concerned, you claim anything older than, let's just say, roughly 6,000, then you're lying. Oh, but see, God stretched space out. It says that in the Bible. Well, there is no such thing as space. You have to get into some of the other sessions to learn that that's true. So don't fall into their world and then have to defend the Bible. You've already lost. So they use 4 methods to determine star ages and distances. I'm only going to talk about one of them with any detail, but parallax is one. We'll see that on the next slide. These other 3 fall into the same argument as the evolution. You date the fossils by the layer that they're in. You date the layers by the fossils that are in them. It's circular reasoning. So for variable stars, they compare the brightness of stars that seem to vary in brightness, and you say, well, this one's dimmer than that one, so it's further away. Well, we don't know that that's true. The assumption may not be true, so you can't make that conclusion. Then they use color, and they'll say that stars follow an evolution sequence, and they go from blue to, I don't remember, yellow and orange, and I used to know that stuff because I used to believe it, but the assumption that they follow an evolution sequence is not true. There hasn't been enough time, first of all. And then the whole rate of recession or the Doppler effect, redshift, I'm not sure if they believe that anymore. I think they've kind of done away with that. But they used to say, well, based upon how redshifted it was, is how far away it was. Again, wrong. Assumptions are wrong. So in all of these, there's invalid assumptions. And we'll look at the parallax in a little bit more detail here. So the whole idea is that the Earth revolves around the sun. Not true. But nonetheless, it revolves around the sun, and when it's on opposite sides, you're going to see the stars differently. And so they're going to say, based upon how much the star moved relative to one that's fixed. Some of them are fixed, yet some of them move. Of course, if you follow their cosmology, they're all moving. But the claim is that you can tell how far away it is by how much it moved. Now, what you have to understand is the distance from one side of the revolution around the sun to the other, while it seems rather large to us, is almost nothing compared to how far away these stars are supposed to be. And they're going to claim, oh, we figured out with great accuracy how far these stars are. So first of all, the Earth doesn't go around the sun. Wrong. Second of all, the math here, you got an angle of almost 0. It's so small, and you're going to claim accuracy to something far off. So again, they'll bully you with their method and their supposed science, and you have to not listen to that. Of course, then disprove I'm wrong. I don't have to do that. You're wrong. I don't have to listen to your argument. And you're not going to change their minds, but just don't believe what they're telling you. You don't have to get them on your side. Just don't get on their side. So now let's talk a little bit about the modern mythology. Why is it a mythology? The mythology is apparent when you look at the names of the planets. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and I'm not even sure Pluto's a planet anymore. But these all come from Roman mythology. Why were those picked? Of course, a lot of things named today, they run out of names, so they use designations and so forth, but early on, this was part of the mythology. The people coming out of the Roman Catholicism in the, we'll see some timeline here coming up in the 1000 AD time frame. They were all part of this mythology, this worship of the Roman mythology. It's been kept going. It all comes out of Babel. So if you go to the book of Daniel, it basically says the Roman Empire still remains, while it's described as the legs of iron. Well, the legs go down to the feet, and the toes show up in the end times. Well, somewhere from the legs to the toes, the feet are still there. Now, while the Roman Empire doesn't exist in the way that it did back then, the remnants of it still remain. No empire has really overthrown it, and so we still remain in a form of the Roman Empire, and we keep a lot of the Roman mythology going. Some of it's Greek, but that's, it's all the same as well. We look at the days of the week, these are named after false gods. Now, I think 6 of them are Norse, and Saturday is Roman, but they're all named after false gods. We're in a mythology. If you look at Hollywood movies, they all date their movies with Roman numerals. Why? What's the point? I don't know if they do that anymore, but I know when I was little, I was always trying to figure out what the date was. MCM, 19 something, whatever the rest of it was. What for? Because you're worshiping false gods. Now, as I'm claiming heliocentrism isn't true, that makes the cosmology a myth. Now, you might not agree with that. You may say, well, heliocentrism isn't false. So you're going to say it's not a myth. But when you come to the conclusion heliocentrism is false, then we're in a mythology. Now, believing that the myth is true makes those believers of it pagan idolaters. We don't worship false gods. Well, you may not believe that you do, but you do. If you dive into some other things, like the numbers that are used, you'll find that they're Masonic or occultic. And the tilt of the earth is an example. I can't remember if it's 24.4 degrees, but If you subtract that from 90, that's 66.6. A little occultic there. A lot of other things like the distances of stars and all, or the planets and things like that, they all there's a purpose to why the numbers are what they are. Oh, well, that's just how far it is. Like they've really measured it. Anyway, let's watch another movie about the United Space Conspiracy. Many of the countries are behind what's going on.
NASA isn't the only space agency. Are all others in on it too?
The answer is yes. Here's a short clip on what you need to know.
The Vector, NASA's official logo. If you've ever looked at NASA's official logo, both their official insignia and their official seal, you'll see that the most prominent object in the seal is a red swooshing object. They call that the chevron or the vector. If you ask NASA's Public Affairs Office, this symbology is featured so heavily in their insignia and seal, they'll give you what really amounts to the standard facile cover story for the unilluminated. They'll tell you that that is a representation of a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s, which was the time the logo was created. Not exactly the case. Someone might want to ask the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, that was formed in 1992, why they chose that same logo. And while you're at it, you can go ask the Chinese, who formed their space agency in 1996, why in the world they're using a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s as their official logo. Then you can ask the Japanese, the South Koreans, Taiwanese, Malaysia, Mexico, Iran, all of these countries, even Bulgaria. They all utilize the vector symbology in their space agency logos for their national space agencies. It gets even deeper. You can go look at the individual manned program patches for NASA. The Mercury program, for example, a blatant use of covert symbology. In every logo dealing with the Mercury program, you'll see what looks like a number 7 in their logo. And again, NASA's official story is that they put this number 7 there so that they could pay homage to the original 7 Mercury astronauts. Kind of forgetting the fact that only 6 Mercury astronauts actually flew into space because number 7 never did. Deke Slayton had a heart problem, so he didn't get to go up. So there were only 6 Mercury astronauts. Yet there's a 7 in every single logo. That's in the official mission or official program insignia for Mercury, as well as the 6 individual mission patches carry this logo. And it carries on to the Space Shuttle program. If you look at the Apollo logo has a big letter A in it. At least that's what they want you to believe, but it's not. Again, that's just a simple way of explaining away the inclusion of this vector symbology in the logo. If you go to the Space Shuttle program, the original Space Shuttle STS program patch is a triangular patch that, again, hides the use of the chevronic vector symbology. And that also goes for many of the STS-specific mission patches. Every single one of the International Space Station expedition patches carry the vector symbology. The Russian Mir Space Station used the vector symbology. That was their official logo. And you can even go deeper and look at military-industrial complex companies. Look at the logo on a company like Lockheed Martin, 2 vectors. The X Prize logo, Ames Research Labs, U.S. Space Command. When you get into the military realm, the United States Space Command, their official logo is the vector symbol. And when you look at the military's individual space-specific programs, all of them deal with vector symbology in their official insignias. And the question really becomes, who or what are these people paying homage to?
Let's look at NASA's Earthrise. Now let's look at JAXA's Earthrise. Do you believe this is real?
Why are all the other planets round then?
When you compare amateur footage done with professional-grade cameras and compare it to NASA's official images of planets and stars, it's clear that NASA images are all computer-generated, no different than the photos of Earth. What have become known as planets are round lights that seem to be set over the flat Earth. The so-called planets and stars are not what we have been told they are, and comparing luminous objects that you see in the sky to the Earth under your feet is very ineffective for actually proving the supposed rotundity of the Earth. Since there are no actual photographs of the Earth, and motion has never been experienced or proven, it would seem more logical for one to assume that we are on a flat, motionless plane, and everything we see in the heavens revolves around us.
Now, a little bit more on geocentrism and heliocentrism. We can look at geocentrism as the smaller lie. It helps establish that the Earth is a planet in space, which isn't true. But the Earth is special because everything else revolves around it. So that came first, and that like opened the door. And then heliocentrism is a little bigger lie, because the sun is the center of worship, and Earth is just another planet. So we start to become insignificant. And of course, as they expand the universe, we are really almost nothing. So I'm not sure if it'll end up in another study, but to me, universe is a word we shouldn't use. And people want to claim, well, God created everything in verse 1 of Genesis 1:1. It's universe. In one verse, he created everything. Well, I disagree. I think he created everything in chapter 1. Verse 1 just introduces what he's about to do in the upcoming 6 days. So I believe universe is a lie, and that gets us started. Once you start stepping through the door of the lie, you're open up to everything else. But anyway, back to geocentrism and heliocentrism. There are corrupt scientists behind each. And they're all Jesuits, Masons, and you can come up with other organizations and groups, but they have an agenda, and it's all part of devil worship. And they won't tell you that. So here is a little history of the false cosmology, naming some prominent scientists. You'll just have to look at that and go do some research. A lot of these are Jesuits. Today, astronauts are mostly Masons. And while someone's shown the Roman Catholic Church way over here on the right, I believe they came into the picture earlier, and initially they rejected the heliocentrism. But I think that was a bit of a facade. They were pretending, because they were supporting these people that were pushing it. And then they eventually came on board. Got to remember, Satan's behind all of it. Not only their false Christianity, but also this cosmology. So he got them all united. As the Bible says, Jesus says, Satan doesn't fight against himself. So once he gets his followers in line, it all lines up. And they're all telling the same story. So now let's watch a movie about who's responsible. And then we'll follow that with why the lie.
Well then, who's responsible for this deception?
You will find that the Jesuits and the Vatican have been intimately involved in all things space, including owning the earliest telescopes and, to this day, the largest owners of observatories and telescopes in the world. The Society of Jesuits have been actively spreading the heliocentric theory for 500 years, while trying to bury thousands of years of flat Earth cosmology. The Jesuits are rulers of all powers that we are aware of, and have been ruthless in their pursuit of world domination for centuries, no matter who is killed or what has to be done to establish a one-world order out of chaos. They rule over, or are deeply partnered with, people like the Rothschilds and many other international banksters, secret societies, especially the Freemasons, as well as Zionist Jews, and especially Zionist Jews in seats of power. They rule over all the alphabet agencies and government think tanks, including the NSA, CIA, FBI, Mossad, KGB, Roundtable, Committee of 300, Tavistock Institute, Lucius Trust Publishing, Bilderberg Group, and the Council of Foreign Relations, including representative government and legislation like the U.S. Presidency, Congress, and the Supreme Court. The Jesuit order is said to have been established by Jews, again showing that the Jews are behind some of the biggest hoaxes in history, including the Holocaust. Freemasons are also spread out all over the world to further the different agendas that serve this Illuminati elite.
Why the lie?
Their desire is to convince us that we are only one of a septillion other planets flying through infinite space. A septillion? Where do they get these numbers? A septillion has 24 zeros. They want us to think that we are nothing more than a cosmic accident caused by a big bang that took place 14 billion years ago. Again, where do they get these numbers? How one could draw that conclusion is unknown. They want us not to understand our origin and go on believing that life is meaningless. They want us to believe that alien life is real and that they created us. Look no further than Ancient Aliens for the propaganda. Not to mention countless shows and movies they program us with. This isn't just about flat Earth versus round Earth. It's much bigger than that. Whatever they plan on doing needed the spherical Earth groundwork laid before they could proceed. They may either shock us with a fake alien invasion or a disclosure of the beings that have always been among us, passed off as life from distant galaxies.
So, in conclusion, the popular cosmology is simply a mythology. Don't be bullied by the false sciences. And there are many of them that are telling a story, and they're all after money. The god gravity ultimately manifests itself in a black hole. And a black hole is where darkness is more powerful than light. And isn't that what the devil's trying to do? Show himself to be greater than God? Or at least equal. He wants to be like God. And in his universe, he's more powerful. Science tries to explain away the Bible, and you can find a number of examples, but geology to me is just one of them. For example, they explain earthquakes as the movement of these tectonic plates. And, it goes back to the flood. Well, I don't think they're tectonic plates. I think they're earthquakes because it's a manifestation of God's wrath, and they're signs of things that he's doing. Of course, we can't have that in science. That's silly. So they come up with their other explanations. You got to remember I won't say remember. You got to look into geology and when it really took off. I can't remember if it was Charles Lyell. He's the one that influenced Darwin into evolution. So a lot of atheists, God haters behind a lot of these sciences. Go do the research. There are some sincere people in them now, but they're caught up. And you got to fall in line, otherwise you won't progress in school and in workplace. Finally, in Romans 3:4, it says, God forbid, yea, let God be true, but every man a liar. And I won't read the rest. It's not really relevant here. And this is out of context, but let's go to God's word to see what he has to say. And if what people are saying doesn't align with what God's saying, then obviously that man's a liar because God is true. So you may not be convinced that we're in a mythology. If you go and do some research and you find out all the inconsistencies with what you're being told, you will start to wonder. And you will wonder, why are they lying to us? Now, don't necessarily have a good answer to that, but it's all part of the devil's plan. And really, I have to say, God is behind giving the devil the opportunity to deceive us. The people don't want God, and I'm saying this in general, I'm not talking about Christians, they don't want God, and so God is giving them a universe where he evidently isn't in it, because that's what the people want. And if you go and look at the nation of Israel, God would turn them over to what they wanted, even though it was a curse. So God has provided a creation that can be turned into a lie, and the evidence appears to line up with a lie. But if you look into the evidence closely, you'll find that there are problems with those lies, and the truth will be seen. So do some research, see what you can learn, and conclude. Thank you.